He didn't even look up when I set the bowl in front of him. His thumb just kept scrolling on his phone, backlit by that pale afternoon light from the window. I stood there a second longer than I meant to, hands resting on the back of the chair, waiting. Not for a compliment, not even a thank you, just a moment, a glance. The stew was still steaming, rich with the smell of bay leaf and slow-cooked onion. I'd stirred it all morning, humming to myself the way James used to. Blake didn't notice any of it. He finally reached for his spoon, stirred once, then let it rest on the table like the meal had already failed him. He didn't taste it. I cleared my throat gently. "It's the same one your mom used to love." "Mm-hmm," he said, eyes still on the screen. And that, more than anything, hollowed me right out. The ladle slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a soft, dull sound, not a clatter, just surrender. I stared at it lying there on the sea. Tile, stew still clinging to the curve like it didn't want to let go either. My hand trembled, the same hand that had stirred that pot, served that boy, wrapped birthday gifts, held James's tired fingers when his heart gave out. The kitchen hummed quietly, the curtains fluttering as if they were unsure whether to close for the night. The steam rising from the pot was slower now, curling toward the ceiling like it knew this day wouldn't rise again. He used to beg for seconds. I remember that more clearly than yesterday's grocery list. He'd sneak into the kitchen when he thought I wasn't looking, giggling, cheeks full, hands sticky with cornbread crumbs. "Shh," he'd whisper, like we were in on something secret. I could almost smell it now. Browned butter, that warm hush of cornmeal rising in the oven. That memory used to comfort me. But now it pressed against my ribs, too tight. The silence at the table swallowed the laughter whole. The kitchen felt like a museum, all preserved and too clean. Too cold. I tugged at my apron, and for the first time, it didn't sit right. It was tied the same way I'd tied it for decades, but suddenly it clung. I shifted, pulled the knot loose, then tighter again, as if I could fix the weight pressing on my chest. I used to think this apron meant something, that as long as I wore it, I had a place here, that I was needed. But standing there with that stew untouched, the air thick with silence, I wondered if I'd become more background than heartbeat. The knot held my ache, not my purpose. The onions were sweet that day, mild. I sliced them slowly, the way I always had, thin, even rings, laid gently in the oil. But as I stood there at the stove, Blake's words from earlier sank in again. "Tastes like dust." My eyes burned. Just a little. I blinked fast and blamed the onions. Said it out loud even, just the onions, like someone was watching. But no one was. The knife was still beside the board. The sink held skins curled, like dried petals, and the air, it was sharp, not from spice, from something I didn't want to name. I didn't slam a thing. I didn't sigh loud or clatter dishes like a plea for attention. I just stopped stirring. Set the ladle down, gentle as a whisper. There was no anger, no tears, just a quiet pull, inward, like old bread dough that's been left too long on the counter and knows it won't rise. I looked at the stove. The stew was done, more than done. And I was too. I left the pot on low and walked out of the kitchen. Tomorrow, I won't cook. Maybe not the day after either. Maybe I needed to cool too. Some evenings, when the sun hits just right through the kitchen window, I lean in near the stove and swear I can still smell James's gravy. Not just the garlic or the bay leaf, though those are there, but something deeper. Rich and warm and worn, like time itself had been slow cooked into the walls. He used to let the sauce simmer for hours, barely touching it, just stirring slowly, letting it breathe. He said the trick wasn't in the seasoning, it was in the waiting. Even now, with the burner cold and the cabinets quieter than they used to be, that scent still lingers, clings to the corners of the room like memory painted in steam. I close my eyes, and for a second, I'm back there, apron around my waist, James humming, the kids clattering behind us. That kitchen didn't just feed us, it held us. In every pot, every pan. In every story that started with, "Remember when Dad?" Sometimes I think the paint is cracked, not from time, but from laughter bouncing too hard off the walls. The girls used to run barefoot, their giggles louder than the mixer. I'd barely cracked the eggs before someone dipped a spoon into the bowl. Flour in their hair, sugar on their cheeks, arms reaching over each other like puppies in a basket. "Mom! She took more battery than me," one would shout, and I'd just smile and hand them each a beater. The kitchen was always cluttered on those days, measuring cups scattered, butter wrappers crumpled, vanilla spilled on the counter. But I never minded. That mess wasn't chaos. It was joy, rising. I didn't think about legacy back then. I wasn't planning to teach anything. I just wanted warm cookies and warm kids. But looking back, I see it clearer now. All those small, hands mixing together, all that laughter baked right into the corners, that was a legacy. Not in the recipe, but in the way they felt safe in the kitchen, happy. You can't buy that kind of joy. It has to be stirred in, slow and steady, like memories in dough. James had this hum, low and steady, like an old song only he remembered. He'd start it without realizing, somewhere around the first swirl of tomato paste in the pan. It wasn't loud, just a gentle melody that made the kitchen feel like a lullaby. The girls would giggle. "Daddy, that's your cooking song?" He'd wink and keep stirring. The sauce always turned out just right when he hummed. After he passed, the house got too quiet. The pots still clanged, the timer still rang, but nothing filled the space between. Sounds. Then one Sunday, I found myself at the stove stirring without thinking, and there it was, that hum, coming out of me. Same tune, same rhythm. I didn't plan it, but it felt right, like he'd left it behind, tucked into the folds of my breath. Now, when I hum, I don't try to match the notes. I just let it rise. Like steam, like memories, like him. I used to tell the girls, "Slow down, don't rush it." They thought I meant the soup, but I didn't. Stirring, I told them, wasn't just about keeping the pot from burning. It was about listening, being present, feeling the food, yes, but also feeling the moment. We'd all gather around the stove, each taking a turn. Elbows bumped. Someone always dropped a spoon, but I'd watch their faces soften as the rhythm settled in. Stir, wait, breathe. Even when they were teenagers, they knew the rules. No quick stirs, no shortcuts. Not in food, not in life. They didn't always get it then. But now I see them with their own kids, calmer, slower, less afraid of silence, and I know the lesson landed. Every pot I stirred with them. It was a kind of prayer. Quiet, repetitive, steady. A prayer for patience, for love, for them to feel home, even when I wasn't in the room. The book's a mess. Pages stuck together with old syrup, corners dog-eared, notes scribbled in 3 different handwritings. There's a smudge of marinara across the chicken parm page, a butter stain on the biscuits. Some parts are so faded, you've got to squint to read my handwriting. But oh, the stories that book holds. There's the lasagna we forgot in the oven during a blackout. The pie crust Blake helped roll, lumpy but full of pride. The chicken soup I made when James had that awful flu, and he said it tasted like healing. Every stain is someone's fingerprint. Every smudge, a moment we didn't clean up because we were laughing too hard. It's not a tidy legacy, but it's real. And when they open it someday, I hope they don't try to keep it clean. I hope they add their own mess to it. Before phones and earbuds and all that noise, they used to reach for my hand across the counter. Sticky fingers, half covered in dough, tugging my apron, asking if it was time to add the chocolate chips. "Just a little longer," I'd say, and they'd wait, rocking on their toes. I'd feel their hands in mine, small, eager, trusting, and I knew I was more than just the one who fed them. I was their center. They didn't ask if the cookies were organic. They didn't scroll while I stirred. They just wanted me. Fully. Sometimes I still feel it. That soft tug on my apron. It doesn't come from the outside anymore. It's in my chest. In the warm spot that never cooled. Because being wanted like that, even once, is something no recipe could ever teach me. I tied the ribbon myself. Yellow gingham. Same pattern as the one on my favorite apron. I tugged the ends just right. Made sure the bow sat neat. Not too tight. Not too loose. That book meant something, and I wanted it to look like it did. Inside were more than just instructions. There were birthdays, snow days, quiet Sundays. Notes scribbled in the margins like whispers from my heart. Too much salt this time. Blake didn't mind. I placed it on the counter next to the pie. Still warm. I imagined him walking in, seeing it there, unwrapping it slowly like a gift. I imagined his face softening when he flipped through the pages and saw his own childhood smudged in sauce. Love has a flavor, you know. I'd been serving it for decades. I just hoped he'd taste it again, this time from paper, not plate. The pie still held its shape, golden and proud, though the air had cooled around it. A faint sweetness lingered, buttery and soft. I stood a few steps away, waiting for something to shift. The recipe book lay right beside it, ribbon still perfect, untouched. I stared at it longer than I should have. At first I told myself he hadn't seen it, but I knew better. The wall clock ticked, louder somehow in the quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask questions, it just answers them with silence. The curtains swayed a little, and the breeze carried nothing but stillness. That book, with its frayed corners and worn cover, stayed where I left it. He didn't pick it up, didn't even glance. And in that moment, I felt something small inside me settle, and then sink. Every smudge in that book meant something. There was the cinnamon roll recipe from the day Blake cracked his first egg, shell and all. I remember how he clapped when I let him stir. There was a smear of tomato on the lasagna page from the time James used too much salt, but still ate 3 helpings. And notes from a Sunday when Blake's mama cried all morning, and I kept baking. Bread just to fill the silence. It wasn't just food, it was us. Every page a piece of time folded gently between meals. I thought maybe he'd read it one day, not like a cookbook, but like a letter from the only place that ever stayed warm. He used to peek into the oven, eyes wide, fingers crossed, asking, "Is it done yet?" He'd be so eager he'd burn his mouth on the first bite and still ask for seconds. Now he just sat, phone in hand, barely chewing. The pie slice I left out glistened at the edge of his plate, untouched. His fork rested like it had lost interest. When he left, the chair scraped softly. Against the floor, no goodbye. Just the quiet thud of footsteps fading upstairs. I stood at the sink, the water lukewarm, bubbles going flat. I looked down and saw the crumbs on his plate, not many. Enough to show he'd tried, but not enough to say he cared. I'd baked hope into that crust. Folded it in, gently, like I always did. But hope, if left too long, starts to dry out. I didn't peel potatoes that afternoon. Didn't set the meat out to thaw. Instead, I folded my apron and laid it over the back of the chair. My hands, usually so busy, rested quietly in my lap. The stove stayed cold, the pot stayed empty. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. Just done. Like a candle that flickers out on its own, not from wind, but from quiet. I looked around the kitchen, the space that had once been my rhythm, my pulse. No one asked, "What's for dinner?" No one leaned in for a taste. Maybe the silence wasn't something I had to fight. Maybe it was my turn to listen to it. I didn't move the book. Didn't hide it or put it away. Just let it sit on the counter, ribbon still neat, waiting. The pie beside it was mostly cool now. The room dimmed into that soft blue dusk, where everything looks a little more honest. I glanced at it once more, then turned off the light. Maybe one day, when they come home late or wander in hungry for something more than food, they'll see. Maybe they'll untie the ribbon, run their fingers over the old ink, see themselves in the smudges and flower prints, and maybe, just maybe, they'll taste the love I left behind. The knock came soft, 3 taps, spaced slow, like a gentle question, not the kind that startles, the kind that waits. I stood there, a moment, hands damp from rinsing greens, heart still tender from the night before. The hallway smelled of eucalyptus from the oil I'd dabbed on the cloth, hoping it might lift the heaviness. I dried my hands on my apron, smoothed it down out, of habit, and walked to the door. I didn't hurry. When I opened it, Mrs. Henley stood there with that calm, settled look she always carried, her gray hair pulled back, her floral blouse soft in the morning sun. "Good morning," she said, holding up a little bundle wrapped in a tea towel. "Thought you might like some company." Her voice was low, gentle. I didn't answer right away, just nodded, then stepped aside to let her in. She didn't push, just smiled and followed the quiet right in with her. She stepped onto the porch and paused, letting the morning hold us. Her smile wasn't wide or knowing, it just was, like she brought it with her, same as the tea towel in her hand. No questions. No tilted head or "Are you okay?" Just a smile that said, "I don't need you to explain." And that was everything. I felt my shoulders drop without meaning to, like they'd been up for days and someone finally said, "You can rest now." She unwrapped the towel slowly, revealing 2 old teacups and a small thermos. "I used lemon today," she said softly, eyes still kind, but not searching. Just felt like the thing. I smiled, barely, but it came from somewhere honest. We sat down side by side, her shawl catching the breeze at the corner. The porch tiles beneath us were warm from the sun. The scent of her lavender lotion floated around. Us like memory, we didn't rush into talking, we just sat. And somehow, I didn't feel like I needed to fill the air. She poured the tea slowly, like she knew I needed a pause between steps. The scent filled the space between us, lemon and something soft beneath it, maybe honey. "Still warm," she said. She added just enough sweet. Not too much. The kind of touch that says, "I've done this before. I know what comfort tastes like." The tea curled steam into the sunbeam between us. It moved gently, like a breath you don't know you're holding. We sipped. Nothing fancy, no ceremony. Just the warmth of porcelain and the hush of being seen. I let my eyes close for a second. Let the sip settle. "You always knew how to make it right," I said, voice quiet. She didn't answer, just patted my knee once and kept sipping. Each taste felt like something inside me waking up, not fully, not loud, but like embers remembering their glow. We sat quietly for a long while before she spoke. "They don't know what they're losing." That's all she said. Not a whisper, not angry, just truth. I didn't answer right away. I looked down at my cup, watched the steam dance and disappear. Her voice stayed in the air, resting between the dust motes like sunlight that didn't need to move. I'd heard 100 reassurances before. It was very sweet. Most too quick. But this one settled somewhere real. "They will one day," she added gently, as if she could see I hadn't brushed it off yet. I let out a long breath I hadn't noticed I was holding. "Maybe," I said, but at that moment I believed it a little more than I did before. She reached for her cup again, and I followed, fingers curling around the porcelain. I looked down at my hands, lined, sure, still steady. I remembered all the meals they'd made, all the love they'd stirred. I still had it, still was it. The recipe book sat right there on the counter, ribbon a little loose now. I smiled at it, just faint. I turned back toward her. "You know," I said softly, "not all flavor fades with time." She nodded. "No, it doesn't." The light shifted across the floor, catching the shine of the wood. Something about the way it touched. The edge of her teacup made me feel not seen, but remembered. Some people don't rush into your life. They grow in, soft and slow. That day, I realized I hadn't been wilting. I'd just been waiting for the right garden. The morning sun spilled across the table, soft and golden. I laid down the first napkin, then reached for the second, out of habit. My hand froze halfway, fingers brushing linen. I looked at the chair across from mine, empty, quiet. Then slowly, I folded the second napkin and tucked it back in the drawer. Not bitter, not sad, just still. I placed one plate, one fork, and one cup. The tulips in the jar leaned toward the light. The spoon in my tea clinked gently. As I stirred, I sat down and let the quiet settle. It didn't feel like surrender. It felt like space. Space for peace, for breath, for me. The garden paths curved like they'd been waiting for me. I didn't wear a watch, didn't bring a list. Just stepped out the back gate and let the breeze take the lead. The grass still held a bit of morning dew. My shoes left soft prints behind. Birdsong floated high and clear, unbothered by time. I brushed past the rosemary bush, its scent catching on my skirt. I smiled at it. On the way, it held its ground. There was no one asking when I'd be back. No voices to match pace with, so I slowed, listened, and for the first time in a long while, I answered. The cedar chest creaked open like an old friend clearing its throat. I reached in and pulled out the stack, surprised by how light they felt in my arms. Journals, some leather-bound, some spiral-spined, all softly dog-eared. I settled on the bed, a quilt warmed by late sunlight. The first page was a shaky script, but mine. June 3rd. I think I love him. I smiled, a little choked. The ink had faded, but the girl behind it hadn't. She was curious, hopeful, unbothered by chores or casseroles. I read for an hour, maybe more, and somewhere between the pages I touched her again. She hadn't left. She'd just gotten quiet. The kitchen smelled of lavender and something warm. I'd never made this bread before, lavender oats. It felt strange and lovely. Kneaded slowly, just for the feel of it. When it came out golden, I didn't call anyone, didn't photograph it. I sliced it warm, let the steam rise, and spread a little honey over the first piece. Then I sat at the table and took a bite, sweet, earthy, not perfect, but mine. I smiled, not for approval, not for praise, just because I liked. It twilight painted soft shadows on the walls as I lit the candle. Just one. That was enough. The house was quiet, but it no longer echoed. It hummed, low and easy, like me. I didn't fill the silence with sound, or people, or explanations. Just sat. My reflection in the window caught my eye. Silver hair, soft shoulders, a face more at peace than it had been in years. For a long time, I thought I needed company to feel whole. Turns out, I was always waiting for my own. The leather chair was the same. Same soft creak as I sat down. Same scent of old paper and faint coffee in the air. The wooden clock ticked on the wall, slow and steady, like it had been waiting since the last time I was here. I remembered sitting in that chair. After James passed, holding tissues in one hand, a folder of documents in the other. That day was about goodbye. This one wasn't. The sun spilled through the tall windows, warm against the paneled walls. The room hadn't changed, but I had. I wasn't here to end something. I was here to pass it on. Legacy, I've learned, isn't tied to what you leave behind. It's in what you seasoned while you were here, what you stirred with love, what you wore thin with use, what you gave without needing applause. I folded, my hands in my lap, and waited. It was time. "I'd like to add something," I said, voice even, calm. My lawyer looked up from the form. "Of course." I took a breath and rested my hands on the table. "Put the skillet in the will." He paused, pen hovering. "The skillet?" "Yes. The cast iron one. Back left burner. It's got a crack down the side and a lid that doesn't fit quite right." I watched him jot it down. "That pan's older than Blake," I added. "Fed 3 generations, carried more stories than half this house." The words came steady, not heavy, just, "Sure, if they won't listen now," I said, "maybe one day they'll feel it, in the weight of it." The room held a stillness I didn't try to fill. Some things don't need explaining, just preserving. I reached into my bag and pulled out the recipe book. Ribbon still tied, just slightly loosened at the corners. I placed it gently on the polished wood between us. "They can have this too," I said softly, "when they're ready." He looked down, then up at me, as if sensing it wasn't just a book. "It's not just food," I continued. "It's remembrance, a slow inheritance." The steam curled from his coffee cup, rising into the quiet between us. "I wrote down more than recipes," I added, touching the edge. "They won't see it now, but one day—" I pushed the book forward. It deserved witnesses, even just one. Some folks leave behind stocks and deeds, all crisp and tidy. I left browned butter smudges, scribbled notes in the corners. More time. Next time. Blake's favorite. James liked this with cornbread. That recipe book wasn't printed fancy, just a spiral notebook with more heart than any account ever could hold. I watched him flip through a few pages. He didn't say anything, but I could tell. He understood. That was my portfolio. Right there in those fingerprints, that tear-stained banana bread page, I smiled a little. "It's messy, but it's ours," he nodded. Afternoon light spilled across the desk, soft and forgiving. The pen in his hand made that slow scratch on paper, finalizing something that had always lived quietly. Maybe they'll wrinkle their noses when they first see it, but maybe they'll pause at the smudges. And finally, read the story, in the stains. He slid the briefcase shut, the clasp clicking softly. Sunlight stretched long across the floor now, fading just like the day. "I'll make sure it's all there," he said, voice gentle. I nodded, gathering my shawl. I didn't need them to notice now, or call me wise, or say thank you. But one day, the world would slow down for them too. They'd find themselves standing in the kitchen, quiet, with no one to cook for, and a hunger they couldn't name, and maybe they'd open that drawer. Pull out what I left behind. Maybe they'd tie the apron on crooked, like Blake used to, and read the words I'd folded between flour and memory. And maybe, just maybe, they'd taste what I tried to give them. Not just the food, but the love. The knock was gentle, just 3 taps, spaced. Out like he was testing the idea of being here. I froze in the porch swing, a shawl around my shoulders, the scent of rosemary and cooling butter still hanging in the air. The moonlight spilled soft across the steps, and the wind stirred the garden leaves like they were listening too. I wasn't expecting anyone that late, and certainly not Blake. I stood, heart thudding louder than the creak of the swing behind me, and opened the door. He stood there, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes flicking past me, unsure where to land. "Hey," he said. Just that. Quiet. Like he wasn't sure I'd let him say more. I didn't speak right away. Just opened the screen wide enough for him to come through, and he did. Slowly, like memory returning on hesitant feet. He held it with both hands like it might fall apart. The ribbon was gone, the edges curled, corners bent, and a faint red smudge trailed across the page I knew held the cornbread recipe. Tomato, maybe. or sauce. Either way, it has lived now. Blake looked down at it, then up at me, thumb tucked between two open pages. I've been reading it, he said, voice low, unsure. Tried a few. He didn't have to explain. The stain said, enough. I didn't scold. Didn't ask where the ribbon went, I just nodded once. The porch light flickered above us, and somewhere out in the dark, a cricket sang. The book had been quite a long time. It was finally speaking again. He looked down, again, then back at me. I tried the cornbread, he said, voice soft and cracked around the edges. But it wasn't right. He paused, then added, I followed the steps, but it still felt off. It wasn't just the recipe he meant. I knew that. It tasted, I don't know. Flat, maybe. He looked lost in the telling. Like the act of making it had stirred something inside he wasn't ready for, and in that voice I heard him again, the boy who used to tug my apron strings, ask for one more bite, one more story, one more minute, and for the first time in a long while he let me hear him. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but the tears didn't come. Instead, something warm spread through me, soft, slow, like honey melting across fresh bread. I didn't need an apology, didn't need a speech, just that look in his eyes, that quiet, flickering recognition, like he saw me again. Not just the apron, not just the food, me. We stood there under the porch light, both of us tucked in shadows and forgiveness. Thank you, he whispered, like a secret he was still learning to say. I didn't say, you're welcome. I just touched his arm and nodded. That was enough. The oven light glowed low across the kitchen, wrapping the counter in soft gold. We didn't say much as we walked in, just moved like we used to, him on the right, me on the left. I pulled out the cornbread, sliced it, and warmed it just a touch. The smell rose gently into the air. Butter, oat, memory. I split the piece and handed him half. He sat down without a word. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. He took a bite, slow, then nodded once. That quiet kind of nod you feel in your throat. Like the boy who used to ask for seconds had come back just long enough to say, I remember. The spoon sat untouched between us. Steam curled in the hush, and something in the silence felt full. He looked down at the book again before we stood, held it like it mattered. I could tell he wanted to ask, but I didn't know how, so I took it from the table, wiped the edge gently with my apron, and handed it to him. No ceremony, no speech, just trust. He looked up at me, eyes glassy, heart wide open. You sure? I nodded. It's yours now. He tucked it under his arm, careful, like it carried something more than pages. The porch door creaked open behind. Him. The night wrapped around his shoulders. I watched him walk into the dark recipe book pressed close like a heartbeat, and the kitchen behind me. Felt quiet, but not lonely. The kitchen was bright with spring light, the kind that warms you from the inside out. Sun poured across the counters, and there he was, Blake, standing at the stove with his sleeves rolled up just the way James used to. Neat, even. Like he'd done it 100 times before. His forearms were dusted with flour, a little smudge near his wrist, and he was so focused he didn't notice me watching. The way he leaned in, how his fingers adjusted the spoon. There was something soft in it, not just practiced, but present. He looked older, but also gentler. I sat at the kitchen table, hands around my mug, not saying a word. I didn't want to break the spell, and as I watched him move, memory swirled. James reached for the salt, Blake as a boy asking to stir. It was all layered there, like pages in a well-loved cookbook, familiar, precious, whole. The onions sizzled a little too fast. I saw the flame flicker high beneath the pan, just enough to singe the edges if left too long. Years ago, I would have said something. A gentle, Turn it down just a touch, sweetheart. But this time, I stayed quiet. He stood there, brow furrowed, spoon in hand, concentrating like the pot might speak if he listened close enough. The window was cracked open, birdsong fluttering in on the breeze, time warming in the oil. I saw it, the hesitation in his wrist. But then he adjusted, just slightly, on his own, and my heart, it swelled. He didn't need correction. He needed space. Sometimes love isn't in the teaching. It's in the trusting and letting go of the apron strings. Well, that's its own kind of love, too. There was something in the way he stirred, slow, steady, no rushing. His hand moved the spoon with the back press I'd taught him without words. Not circular, not chaotic, just sure. I didn't say a thing, but I felt it. Deep in my chest, that rhythm, it was mine, not copied, remembered. Like his hands held a memory older than his mind. Something passed down, not spoken aloud. The stew bubbled gently. The breeze moved the lace curtain like a breath, and in that moment, I realized he wasn't just making dinner. He was stirring something that had lived in this kitchen long before. Today, it wasn't an imitation, it was a legacy. The scent rolled through the house before I even noticed. Onions, tomatoes, a little sage. But it wasn't just food. It was a presence. It was the way Sunday used to smell. When James hummed at the stove, the girls giggled in the living room, and Blake ran in barefoot asking if the rolls were done. I sat back in my chair and closed my eyes. Let it fill my lungs. It didn't just warm the room. It wrapped around the edges of every memory that ever passed through these walls. And for the first time in a long while, it wasn't coming from me. It was coming from him. The back door was cracked just enough to let laughter float in from a neighbor's yard. And in the middle of all that, Blake stood steady at the stove, not just part of the story, choosing it fully. He rested the spoon on the edge of the pot and stood still for a moment, eyes on the bubbles rising. I think I get it now, he said. His voice wasn't loud. It was quiet, almost like a discovery whispered to himself more than me. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't need to. He wasn't just talking about recipes. He'd found the thread, the invisible line that ties you to something older, deeper. The way, food, love, memory, they all blend together if you stir long enough. Sunlight caught the lid of the pot, casting a shine across the stove. The clock ticked steady on the wall, and in that sacred hush, I felt something settle. He didn't need my voice to explain it anymore. He'd tasted it. He wiped the counter with my old towel, the one with the faded tulip embroidery. His movements were slow, mindful, not rushed like most days used to be. The recipe book was closed and resting by the stove, edges curled, pages softened with use. He reached over and tucked it back in its drawer without a word. I watched him from the table, hand resting against my cheek. And it hit me. My life. All those moments, the little gestures, the seasoning of decades. It was still moving. Still. Stirring. Just in new hands. He didn't look back when he finished wiping. Just gave a small nod to himself. Not pride, just peace. The breeze brought in distant laughter from down the block, and I knew, when I leave this kitchen, it will keep going, because he's here, and he remembers. I folded the page along its old crease, the one that had softened under years of fingertips and a few spills of melted butter. It gave without resistance, as if it knew it was time to rest. The edges were slightly wrinkled, corners worn, a faint thumbprint from a day I could almost name. I didn't look around. Didn't need a witness, just walked to the drawer, slid it open, and tucked the recipe inside. No ribbon, no note. It wasn't a goodbye. It wasn't even an ending, just a quiet placement. A returning. The lace curtain shifted in the breeze, letting. In the scent of thyme from the garden, and the hush of the kitchen deepened like it understood. No applause, no announcement, just care, just memory. Because sometimes the most sacred things live not on display, but right there in the drawer, waiting for hands that still remember how to hold them. The bowls had long been cleared, and the pot sat in the sink, soaking. But the kitchen still held something warm. The scent of garlic, rosemary, and love still clung to the air, and with it came a quiet hum in my chest, soft and full. That stew. It sang, not loudly, not like a trumpet, more like a lullaby someone hums long after the baby's asleep. I walked past the counter, ran a hand along the warm wood, sat in my chair and listened, not with my ears, but with every piece of me that ever stirred a pot with hope. Outside, birds called faintly across the fence. Inside, the silence glowed. Even after the meal was done, the story lingered. That's how you know something mattered, when it lingers. No one ever filmed me cooking, no lights, no music swelling when the bread came out golden. But legacy, real. Legacy doesn't come with applause. It comes slow, simmered. It's built in repetition, in flour on your apron, in the way someone remembers to stir from the outside in. The clock ticked gently on the wall, not marking urgency, but rhythm, my rhythm, and now his. Legacy doesn't always look like much while you're living it. It waits until the kitchen is quiet, until someone opens the drawer and finds you still there. Someday, maybe Blake will pull that same page from the drawer. The fold is still neat, the ink a little more faded. He'll flatten it gently on the counter, maybe sniff without meaning to, and the scent of memory will rise just enough to pause him. He'll bake it, maybe for someone smaller than him. Maybe for someone who asks, "Why does yours taste like home?" And he'll smile and not quite know how to answer, because it was never just cornbread. It was hands, and silence, and presence. It was love passed like a bowl at dinner. He'll crease it again, his own crease near mine, and the page will keep living. I didn't write it to be remembered. I wrote it so we wouldn't forget. Each dash, each scribbled note in the margin, that was me holding time. Trying to stitch the days together like thread through cloth. I didn't care if it was neat. I cared that it was true. One page at a time, I kept our story going. Through pot roast, through pies, through birthdays with too much frosting and Tuesday. Dinners no one appreciated at the time. I wasn't archiving. I was holding on. Because when you've fed people with your hands long enough, the hunger you understand best isn't for food. It's for belonging. And that's what I was trying to feed. A recipe doesn't need your voice forever. Just once. Just long enough for someone else to stir it and say, "I think I remember this." That's the kind of story that keeps rising, even when the chair is empty, even when the drawer closes with a soft click. The house was quiet, but warm. The scent of stew still lived in the walls, breathing easy. Not mine anymore. Ours. And that was always the point. If something in this story reminded you of a recipe, a person, or a quiet moment you've tucked away, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if these kinds of memories feel like home to you, you're welcome to stay a while and subscribe.